with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, May 7th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Eric Blanc, author of State Revolt, Teachers' Strikes, and Working Class Politics. Also on the program today, it's impossible because, of course, there was no underlying crime, or so we've been told, but 500 prosecutors, 500 former federal prosecutors say Trump would have been charged with obstruction were he not president. Also on the program today, Steve Mnuchin appoints himself Supreme Court Justice and rules he is not compelled by the law to release Trump's taxes to House committees.
Just doesn't feel right, okay?
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris calls for full Trump tax repeal. Boeing knew about safety alert problems on the 737 for a year without telling the FAA. New York Attorney General sues IRS and Treasury for ignoring records requests. The White House Office of Management and Budget floats redefining poverty to make it harder for folks to get food and child support. Meanwhile, Donald Trump pardons a war criminal. And new video taken by Sandra Bland released prompts calls to reopen her case. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Forgive me. I have, I think you probably have already noticed, I have what I think is the early development of a cold, sore throat. My throat is slowly contracting, and I'm anticipating by the end of this program I will not be able to breathe. So we shall see and endeavor to persevere as we go forward. But I am buoyed by this Jerry Falwell tweet from yesterday. He writes, this is Jerry Falwell Jr. Sadly, the original Jerry Falwell has left the building, as it were, headed up, of course, to heaven, where guys like him go. And after the best week ever for Donald Trump, he writes, no obstruction, no collusion. New York Times admits Barack Obama did spy on his campaign, and the economy is soaring. I now support reparations. Trump should have 2 years added to his first term as payback for time stolen by this corrupt failed coup. This, of course, was retweeted by the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Hard cosign.
Good tweet, good post.
RT's equal endorsements.
I mean, this is, Donald Trump's strategy is to, and there's going to be a theme here today, actually, is to rally the support of a narrow group of people in this country, to maintain the the support of his base. And we'll hear, too, I think, from Eric Blanc when we talk about the teacher strikes. For years, I've been doing this on radio or in some form or another, and the least informed critique I have ever received about doing this stuff, the most consistent and least informed critique, has been, you're just preaching to the choir. I think what people are starting to come to understand is it's the choir who actually determines the outcome of a lot of these things. It was the choir, as it were, maybe even the clergy, who were responsible for these strikes across the country, or at least the catalyst for it. And we're starting to realize that I think there's broader understanding that more and more you have to play to your base. And not just play to your base, but motivate your base, because they are the people that go out and do all the work. There is a significant percentage of the American public who are simply along for the ride. And you need to have your base go pick them up at their homes and get them involved in stuff, whether it's voting, or these are not mutually exclusive activities, but activism and whatnot, organizing. And so Donald Trump knows this. I mean, he's trolling. And he writes following that, despite the tremendous success that I've had as president, including perhaps the greatest economy and most successful 2 years of any president in history.
Tell me about it. Preach.
They have stolen 2 years of my, and then he's kind enough to put in parentheses, our presidency, in more parentheses, collusion delusion, that we will never be able to get back. The witch hunt is over, but we will never forget, which of course is a slogan about that they use about the Holocaust. We will never forget. Make America great again. And there it is. Donald Trump calling for reparations, hoping to get a 6-year term for his presidency. And, you start to figure out the calculations. I think he's thinking, if I can stay in the presidency until my 80s, I am going to bet that no court will sentence me to prison after I get out. Because, I mean, look, on a day when 500 former prosecutors say that were it not for the Department of Justice's finding that you cannot indict a sitting president, therefore, that being policy amongst anyone who is working for the Department of Justice, i.e. Mueller, Donald Trump would have been charged with obstruction of justice. The whole point why you have obstruction of justice is because it obstructs your ability to seek justice. In other words, it prevents law enforcement from being able to prove a possible crime. It's quite clear from the report that Mueller is laying out, saying that there are instances where we just don't really know. We don't have access to this, but we clearly have less because of the lying and of the trading for pardons and whatnot. And there is increasing speculation and assessment of the report that basically, and in fact, Mueller writes it in the report, we are attempting to memorialize the evidence here so that it doesn't go stale for when the president leaves the office. And the reason why you do that is not just for the history books. And so, I'm sure Donald Trump is very, very interested in winning a second term, because it's probably, despite the fact that the White House is a little bit rougher than he's used to, and he likes Mar-a-Lago, still more comfortable than prison.
There's executive time. There's ways of making do.
Right, exactly. If I sleep long enough into the day, it doesn't bother me.
A lot of leaders, Putin, Mugabe, who, a big part of their calculus was, if I leave this specific location, I'll probably get into some significant trouble. That's definitely where Trump is at.
But and we'll talk about this later in the program. Pardoning a war criminal really sends a great message, and I'm being literal. The guy spent 5 years in prison for a war crime. So we will get to all that and more. And of course we'll be talking to Eric Blanc, who I've spoken to a couple of times on Ring of Fire Radio, who has been covering. Really, I mean, I guess the biggest element of what we've seen in a resurgence of labor actions across the country over the past year and change. In fact, I think there's one going on still right now in Tennessee involving teachers. We'll talk to Eric about that. In the meantime, folks, we're just a couple of days away from Mother's Day, and it's coming up, and there's nothing we wouldn't do to make sure the special moms in our lives are happy. Shari's Berries has special Mother's Day berries designed just for mom. They're topped with chocolate chips, pink shimmer sugar, and swizzles. I should note, because I see them so vividly in my mind right now. Those are 3 different toppings on the strawberries, all equally delicious. And you get to choose the delivery date to ensure that mom gets your gift of Shari's Berries exactly when you want her to. Better yet, your satisfaction is always guaranteed. The berries are delicious. They come packed in a sort of a cooler type of situation that keeps them absolutely fresh. Your mom will open up, and if you're smart, you will be there when they arrive, and you will get double order so that you will eat. You can eat literally 6 of them, and she will still have plenty for herself. Don't wait until the last minute on this one. Visit berries.com today to order freshly dipped strawberries at $19.99 for mom or moms in your life, and to make mom really happy, or in my case, so that you can eat just as many berries as she does. You can double the berries for just $10 more. Mother's Day is Sunday, May 12th. Visit berries.com. That's BERRIES.com. Click on the microphone in the upper right-hand corner. Enter my code Seder. That's berries.com. Click on the microphone. Enter the code Seder. Not just for Mother's Day, but a very good gift for Mother's Day. Also, do you like the thrill of an escape room? Looking for clues and solving puzzles? I play a lot of Clue with my kids. Oh, really? Yeah, they really do like that. Introducing Hunt a Killer. It's a monthly subscription game where you become a detective immersed in a murder mystery. Each month you'll receive crime scene photos, evidence, motive, and a suspect information that you'll need to use to solve a crime. It's so interactive and convincing that it looks and feels real. You'll be racking your brain to solve the mystery and anxiously awaiting the next box of clues. It's perfect to play solo, during date night, or with friends for a game night so you can swap theories. Started to do this a little bit with Mile. It got a little bit intense for her. But it's cool. You wait for...
Wait, intense? Like, were you like that Dave Chappelle sketch where he had the Make-A-Wish kid gets to play video games with him and he ends up terrorizing the kid? Is that what you mean?
No, not quite. But it's super cool. Waiting for those the next clues that you get, and it's nice to not have it all be in your hand, as it were, with the phones. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority for 20% off your first box. They only accept 200 members per day, so hurry up to take advantage of this offer. It's huntakiller.com/majority for 20% off your first box. huntakiller.com/majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Eric Blanc. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Don't forget, you can support this show by becoming a member and supporting the program, getting extra content every day, getting it commercial-free by heading to jointhemajorityreport.com. Now on the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Eric Blanc. He is a former high school teacher, writes about labor, and author of Red State Revolt, The Teachers' Strike Wave, and Working Class Politics. Welcome to the program, Eric.
Thanks for having me back on.
So, Eric, we've spoken in the past on Ring of Fire as radio as a lot of these strikes were happening over the course of 2018, and we really did have a resurgence of labor activity by teachers, particularly in states that haven't seen much labor action in years. Let's start with West Virginia. What brought about that what were the different forces that spurred that strike?
Well, in some ways, the big story is how similar the conditions are for teachers across the country. So in West Virginia, like in most states, pay has been stagnating. There's been a real concerted underfunding of schools, particularly since the Great Recession, a push towards privatization, and generally speaking, there hasn't been the type of mass resistance until very recently, despite these conditions. And so really one of the particularities of West Virginia is that, in part because there's no collective bargaining and the unions are relatively weaker, that created a bit of a political vacuum in which a relatively small group of radical teachers who first got organized together through the Bernie Sanders campaign and then the Democratic Socialists of America group that came out of that, they were able to take the lead in late 2017 to fight in the direction of a strike to stop a proposed increase of almost 2 times the cost for healthcare. And so they really initiated this rank and file upsurge that then in turn spread across the country.
So the I guess the paradox here is that the lack of an institution allowed for more aggressive elements, I guess, amongst the teachers to step in, like is what you're saying. And let me ask you this: how much, before we go, any further with talking about the dynamics of these strikes, how much did No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top impact this? Because I just remember talking to elementary school teachers of my daughters, maybe 10 years ago, and them telling me, some of the older teachers saying that, the younger teachers who come in, they don't have the sort of same sense of what they can do as a teacher, and it disempowers them across the board. But was there any? I mean, was the so-called education reform movement of the late aughts or the aughts and the early teens, was that implicated at all in any of this?
Oh yeah, it's a huge part of the story, because really what you're seeing is, on the one hand, stagnating pay, worse working conditions, and in turn, combined with that, you have just the practice of being a decent teacher has been made much harder by this over-testing regime in particular, and an overall kind of disciplining and semi-authoritarian incursion into the classroom in which teachers are really prevented from having the necessary autonomy to be good teachers, and instead start teaching to the book, start teaching to the test. And so you have this combination of factors in which teachers want to do a good job. A lot of us get into the profession because we believe in what we are doing, but the corporate ed reform pushed by the Democrats just as much, and in some ways even more than the Republicans, made doing our job increasingly difficult. And that, plus the low pay and underfunding, has set up a very explosive mix.
So, all right, so let's get back to West Virginia. I mean, and what was unique, because West Virginia basically started a rash of strikes, if you will, that went from West Virginia to Virginia, Oklahoma, I guess North Carolina and Kentucky, Georgia, Colorado, Arizona, ultimately in LA this year, and South Carolina, North Carolina, just in the past couple of weeks, not even past week or so. So, all right. So, but what was unique about West Virginia relative to those other states? Were there other elements? I mean, you talked about this, the political vacuum that is a function of it being a right to work state. Were there other dynamics that were taking place there that were unique to West Virginia?
Yeah, there's a few things going on. There's a reason it started in West Virginia, and I think part of that is the history of labor militancy in the state. You know, this gets overdrawn a little bit. Some of the mainstream reports gave the impression that, you know, everyone there is coal miners' son or daughter, and it's not exactly like that. But there's an aspect of truth to that story, particularly in the beginning parts of the strike, where, you know, there was a very deep fear across the state in West Virginia, like in other states, to take an illegal action. These were strikes that broke the law. You know, public sector strikes are illegal in most states of the country, including West Virginia. And it took the initial kind of daringness and sort of courage of teachers in the southern part of West Virginia, Mingo County, Wyoming County, in which there really is still a very real tradition of labor militancy that does have its roots going back almost a century to the mine wars of the early 20th century. And there, they really put their neck out for the rest of the state and ultimately the rest of the country by doing some initial one-day walkouts that inspired other teachers across the state, and that in turn inspired people across the country. So I do think that history of labor militancy, at least in this pocket of southern West Virginia, served as a catalyst that explains why West Virginia was first.
And just also, you know, outline for us, there are unions or associations there, right? I mean, explain to us just what the dynamic is in terms of like the institutions that exist there. And I'm curious as to what your sense is of what they learned.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, there are actually 3 education unions in West Virginia. For the most part, like most unions across the country, they've limited themselves over the last years and decades to lobbying the Democratic Party, and that has been ineffective in large part because the Democratic Party went in power in West Virginia, which actually ran West Virginia for 80 straight years as almost one-party rule up until just 2014, you know, imposed really draconian budget cuts and anti-working class policies. So it's understandable why neither the unions nor the Democratic Party has a kind of enthusiasm that you know, one might expect. So the unions really had to get pushed into supporting these strikes. To their credit, for the most part, they did eventually come on board. The union leaderships were reticent, but under pressure ended up supporting the strikes. And that was important because the unions did provide resources and an infrastructure in West Virginia for the strikes to cohere, even if the leaderships of these unions didn't take the initial impetus. And so I think it's a little bit unclear, to be honest, what the lessons learned by the union leadership is. You know, we should distinguish the members from the top representatives. One of the exciting things about West Virginia and a lot of these other strikes is that in their wake, there's been thousands of people have joined the union, and some of these radical rank and filers who really pushed towards the strike have also won local, if not statewide, office and have pushed to build a caucus and to really do the type of transformative organizational and political change that would be necessary to have real lasting power and have a union that doesn't just have to get pushed at the last minute into supporting actions, but can actually initiate a strategic campaign.
Okay, so you had this first strike in West Virginia. It was resolved about 3 weeks later, right? I think the first week of March or so, or maybe the second week of March.
Yeah, that's right.
And so how much And then we saw, shortly after that, we saw one in Virginia that was a little bit more limited. But then we saw Oklahoma, and we saw Arizona and Colorado and Georgia. What did folks from West Virginia head there? I mean, how much was being communicated there? How much were these strikes like sort of cross-pollinating each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's probably useful to think of that running on a few different parallel tracks. The big story is that when West Virginia happened, it captured the imagination of teachers across the country. It partly because it was such a explosive and really inspirational strike. It did garner a lot of attention, both more organically through social media and also through the national press. So it caught the imagination of teachers, particularly in red states, who, for years have felt that actually nothing could be done to stop this sort of onslaught against their profession and against schools, because they didn't have the right to strike, they didn't have strong unions, they didn't have collective bargaining, so they just had to take it. And all of a sudden, almost virtually overnight, West Virginia snapped that and gave people a sense of hope and courage and determination. And one of the really interesting things when I did interviews for the book and also just traveling around is over and over and over again, I would hear the same story from the organizers of these strikes in other states, that they said, for us, things were actually really kind of dead. There was very low momentum until West Virginia, and then West Virginia lit a fire in our state and gave us a sense that something different was possible. So that's on the big level. And then there was some discussion in between some of the key organizers about strategies and tactics. Labor Notes, which is sort of the left wing of the labor movement, provided an important space for that to happen, where organically some of the rank and file teachers could trade lessons, could talk about steps, could organize solidarity for one another. One of the really exciting kind of remarkable aspects of these strikes is how much the role of solidarity, and particularly things like sending money for food and pizza, or just taking photos of oneself in your school in support of strikers elsewhere. It was a really central aspect of the strikes, in part because the major national unions, at least in 2018, did not really step up to support the strikes like they should have. They've done a little bit better now. But at the time, it really had to be much more organic over social media and these relatively loose networks to support the other teachers going out on strike. So you have a broad process of inspiration and then some cross-pollination strategically through key organizers.
Interesting. So in many respects, West Virginia ended up being sort of the emperor has no clothes moment for other strikers or potential strikers, I guess, to realize the power they had within their labor. So talk to me about the relationship between the strikers and the community at large, because this is something that, I think we saw first with the Chicago teachers strike. Now, I guess 7-8 years ago, this notion of, maybe we didn't see it first, but we saw it most prominently, I think, in recent times, this notion of social justice unionism, and teachers are very well situated for this, obviously, because of the nature of the relationship between teachers and the students and the parents of students and the community. But how much was that in practice, where the strikers, the union, were garnering community support and actually, fighting on behalf of the community in many respects?
Yeah, it's a huge part of the story. Public sector strikes in general, and teacher strikes in particular, really depend on winning and maintaining public support. You can't really win a strike without that, because unlike in the private sector, you don't have the power to halt profits. And so your leverage in large part is by garnering public support, creating a crisis, and then channeling that anger and sort of crisis dynamic against the politicians. So the the need to win over the public is not a secondary question. It's really central. And as you mentioned, Chicago in 2012 did really set into motion a much broader understanding amongst teacher activists of the potential for this kind of alliance building. And so in West Virginia, that took a lot of different forms. Part of it, maybe most famously, was that the teachers, before beginning their strike, spent a lot of time preparing food and bagged lunches to give to their students, because in West Virginia, like in most states, working class students depend on the free lunch and often free breakfast provided. And so to undercut the media and politician narrative that teachers were hurting their students by going on strike, the teachers spent a huge amount of time and financial resources to make sure that food was provided. And in fact, after spending 8, 9, 10 hours on the picket line or at the Capitol, very often they would spend hours in the evenings hand delivering bagged lunches to families so that students could eat the next day. So small actions like that made a big difference, and then also bigger demands on behalf of students and really working class families generally were just as important. So in Oklahoma and Arizona, the major demands of the strike, in addition to pay, were just for more funding for students, that students needed to be able to have classrooms in which their chairs weren't broken, in which the roofs weren't leaking, in which they had textbooks 15 years old. And these types of demands made it clear to the public at large that the strikes weren't just quote-unquote greedy teachers, but were in fact strikes on behalf of students and parents as well.
So what that particular element, and I'm curious as to, if there's any theories or, principles that have come out of the experience that these teachers have had that you spoke to, where that dynamic can be replicated in contexts where there isn't, it's just, frankly, just not so easy or in this instance, it's like, okay, the teachers have a very clear, advocacy role for their students. They have already pre-existing relationships with and benefit of the doubt from parents, right, who deal with them on a daily basis, very often want to talk to them anyways. How are that element, right, extrapolated for, let's say, like people who are working in sanitation departments or people who are working, in the highway workers or whatever it is? Like, how is there been work on, as far as you know, not just, this cross-pollination in terms of teacher to teacher from state to state, but teachers to other public sector workers who have, communicating those ideas?
Yeah, there's definitely initiatives in that direction. Part of the dynamic is, as you mentioned, that there is something strategic about the position that teachers are in as far as their direct interaction with huge amounts of public. That being said, if we take a step back, there's quite a few industries that are similar. So the most obvious parallel is healthcare, and a lot of healthcare is public. And so it's not a surprise, I think, that the other sector of industry other than education, where you've seen a significant number of strikes recently, has been healthcare. The dynamics are very similar. You have nurses struggling for lower nurse-to-patient ratios, which is an almost exact parallel to teachers fighting for lower class size, which was a major demand, for instance, in Los Angeles. So there's quite a few industries in which the public interface can be leveraged. And I think other public sector jobs are similar. You can make a case that if, for instance, you want better public transportation, well, you need to have more funding for public transportation. And part of that is hiring more workers. Part of that is expanding public transportation. so that, for instance, you can move away from the fossil fuel complex. There's huge implications if you just take a step back around the Green New Deal for expanding the public sector and having unions who right now might be very narrowly focused on just the interests of their members. If they're able to raise the demand to expand public services for all and to lower costs, actually that's a very direct point of leverage that can be used. The reason it hasn't been is not because it's impossible, but for the same reasons it hasn't been leveraged in education until recently, is that you didn't really have enough rank and filers and radicals pushing in that direction. I think that one of the real particularities then of education is that for various reasons, you have more left-leaning workers, people who go into it maybe the profession because of social justice reasons. So you have a critical mass that can push. But historically, these other industries in the 30s, 40s, even well into the 50s, did employ a sort of social justice unionism in which they fought not just for their members, but for the working class as a whole. So I don't think there's a structural reason why that can't be spread. The main difficulty is just resources, and you need people pushing in that direction.
I mean, are we when we look at this, are we looking at when we say why now, is it a function of just simply time plus deprivation? At one point, the camel's back breaks, or is it that there are people going into this profession now who have more radical ideas, or is it just simply a combination? I mean, are what we looking at? Sort of like the natural progression coming out of the financial crisis, that you have a generation of people who have much less opportunity, so they're much more open to the idea of fighting to get some basic pay and services, and they go into the teacher's profession, and this is a profession that has been repeatedly denied over years. I mean, is it a combination of those things, or is there one factor more prominent than the other?
That's a really good question. I think it's hard to separate these out insofar as the general conditions that the economic recession and austerity and really decades of neoliberalism created are the same conditions that led a smaller group of people to become organized radicals. And so the way that context plays out is different for, let's say, a Republican voting teacher who went out on strike. They're ideologically not as committed to some sort of social justice strategy, but in practice are moving in the same direction and are willing to fight back. And then those same conditions certainly inform the trajectory of a smaller group of folks who radicalized through the Bernie Sanders campaign and then took the initiative on these strikes. So, taking a step back, what I see as the really unique thing about the strike wave is how reflective it is of broader social dynamics in the country. And it's one of the reasons why it doesn't feel, and there's no indication that this is a one-off, because as you mentioned, it's a reaction against not just this or that policy, but really a generalized underfunding of the public sector. And I think in some ways it's reflective of a disenchantment with the political center and the status quo in the United States as a whole. So the same type of phenomena that you see with the rise of Bernie Sanders, the rebirth of a socialist movement through the kind of reborn democratic socialists of America and the strike wave, all of these both feed off of each other in very concrete ways and are reflective of a generalized push in the direction of more radical, more working class politics.
So give us a sense of just, how these strikes turned out. I mean, we're talking about West Virginia, Oklahoma, Kentucky, and Georgia, Colorado, Arizona, North Carolina, L.A. There was a strike at the beginning of this year. There was one-day walkouts, if I'm not mistaken, in South Carolina and in North Carolina earlier, just last week. And Tennessee is having a sick out. What are these all being successful? I mean, I've heard some talk at one point that West Virginia's teachers were going to go back out on strike recently. What has been the outcome of this? And then we'll get to, you're going to tell us what the future is going to bring.
Oh, I'll be excited to hear as well what the future is going to bring. The short version is that these strikes have won more in about a year than decades of the old strategy of lobbying the Democrats. You've seen huge gains, 20% pay raise in Arizona, the defeat of charters and privatization in West Virginia. West Virginia won not only in 2018, but they had a new illegal 2-day political strike to stop a latest attempt by the Republicans to impose charters and vouchers in West Virginia, and they had another strike just this year. I think the Los Angeles strike in particular is really the highest, most powerful expression of the wave so far, and in some ways won the most because it wasn't just a defensive battle, but proactively put forward new demands to transform and win the types of public schools that, as their slogan said, the schools that our students deserve. So it won things like lower class sizes. It won anti-racist demands like a fund funded by the district to support immigrant families who are facing deportation. It stopped random searches of Black and Muslim students. A whole slew of real qualitative changes to the schools, in addition to more funding for nurses and counselors, things like this. So the story is that the strikes are winning. They've not come really close yet to the fundamental transformation and improvement of the school system. To do that, you can't do that in just one strike. You also probably can't do it solely through strikes. And that's part of the reason why in California and in some of the other states, there's an effort to now use the energy of the strike movement into creating a more strategic campaign around winning funding, really billions of dollars in funding for schools, and systematically defeating the privatization movement. So that requires a political intervention in the state, both by electing pro-education people and having initiatives and ballot initiatives. So I think that ultimately the movement has really just begun, and the exciting thing is that there's a cross-pollination between these strikes and things like the Bernie Sanders campaign, which is supporting the strikes, and then in turn the strikes are supporting the Bernie Sanders campaign, because I do think ultimately you're going to need political power to have the deep-seated changes. Strikes are amazing and important, but not enough on their own.
I was going to ask you that as the last question. Do you think that the strikes and the success that these teachers associations and unions and just groups have had over the past year have altered the calculus with the Democratic presidential candidates? I mean, maybe this is sort of a little bit outside your portfolio, but I'm wondering if and maybe presidential candidates is too broad. Do they feel like these teachers feel like they have strength in their hand with politicians? Because I spoke to Randy Weingarten, and I think it was also the VP of the AFT. Maybe it was at the DNC in 2016. And one of the reasons why they articulated to me that they endorsed Clinton so quickly was they felt like they were shut out at the table during the Obama administration, when we did have the sort of the height of the corporate education reform movement. And Arnie Duncan, who represented all of that, came in and created this race to the top, I guess. Is there a different dynamic since these strikes?
Yeah, very different dynamic. The proof is in the pudding as far as what works to change the national political conversation and what works to force elites, including the Democratic Party establishment, to change their tune. Contrary to the perspective of Randy Weingarten and most union leaders, it wasn't by getting a seat at the table through early endorsements that any of this changed, but in fact it was by building power independently of the state and employers and both parties that forced a change in consciousness around things like corporate education reform. So the illustration of that is now the Democratic Party, including people who have taken millions of dollars from charters, people like Cory Booker and others, have nominally distanced themselves from the charter movement. It's become quite controversial within the Democratic Party now to come out in favor of privatization. We shouldn't overestimate that, in the sense that the Democratic Party has a long history of making promises and breaking them. But the fact that now, at least nominally, they have to make gestures and talk about why teacher pay needs to go up, why privatization hasn't worked, is a game changer, and it legitimizes the struggle, and in turn it's a reflection of the real impact that struggle has had nationally. But ultimately, it's there's a contradiction still between the fact that teachers and their unions and the students who are fighting for these changes to their schools are coming up against a political system that is funded by billionaires that really want to continue to see the dismantling of public sector for the benefit of private charters. And that contradiction will play an important role in the 2020 debates. And we're hoping that through things like Educators for Bernie and Labor for Bernie, and then more strikes in general, that can force the issue of putting public education and the teachers' strike wave at the fore of what any viable contender to beat Trump will have to raise. And so that, in some ways, the stakes are pretty high.
Eric Blanc, Red State Revolt, the teacher strike wave, and working class politics. We will put a link at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks. Going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. When you become a member, not only does an angel get its wings, but also you get more content. Nearly every single solitary day. On top of which, you get the show commercial free. So you will not hear commercials. But you can always go to the podcast descriptions to hear them. You just go to jointhemajorityreport.com. Sign up, become a member. Pennies a day. Also, reminder, Hunt a Killer. It's a monthly subscription game where you become a detective immersed in a murder mystery. It's so interactive and convincing that it looks and feels real. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority for 20% off your first box. They only accept 200 members per day. So hurry, take advantage of this offer. That's huntakiller.com/majority for 20% off your first box. huntakiller.com/majority. All right, folks. Today is Tuesday. Michael will tell you what happens tonight in this very space that we sit in. Then Jamie, and then Matt. And I will be right back as you go.
Who did the job? Who was the killer? Mila, we need to find out.
That actually, some of that might happen tonight. We also, are you guys cutting to me? Okay, so tonight, first of all, at 6 p.m., we're doing another one of these. We're doing another one of these pre-main show live streams, which we're going to be doing from time to time. Not necessarily every Tuesday, but on some Tuesdays. This Tuesday, the great Mike Hanna is joining us. South Africa's voting tomorrow. And he is, of course, an iconic South African journalist, and we're going to be covering the campaign. We're going to be talking about the various political parties, the market and ecological dimensions of the crisis in South Africa, and how it affects the broader Southern African politics. Now that live stream will be at 6 p.m. And then on the main show, I believe Ranique Allen is joining us to talk about It Was All a Dream. Biggie Smalls, Black Millennials. We're talking about Extinction Rebellion, and then the great Ben Burgess is in studio. We're talking about Marx, Hegel, the Zizek-Peterson debate, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube, patreon.com/TMBS to get all of the illicit histories, idea primers, and theory readings.
All right. Is that it?
That's it.
This week on the Antifada, we have unlocked our new series, Prolet Cult, in which producer AP Andy talks about UFOs, conspiracy theories, the paranormal, the parasocial, and the parapolitical from a Marxist perspective. Quick programming note on that. We unlocked it on Patreon, but only Andy has the raw file that we need to upload to our free stream on fans.fm. And he's currently in Cuba at the first ever Trotskyism conference held in Cuba, but he'll be back soon to put that into the stream for you guys. We also recorded an episode with Katie Halper over the weekend, which will be out tomorrow, in which we talk about the 90s, both the silly pop culture ephemera, as well as the real political and economic currents that had a real effect on politics today. We also sing a new parody song, or we start to, and we're going to sing the rest of it, or Katie is, at the live show on Friday, which I also want to plug. If any of you are in the New York City area, come out to Littlefield this Friday, 8 p.m. I'm going to be appearing at the Katie Halper and Struggle Session live show, along with Jake Flores, Matt Taibbi, and all of the Struggle Session folks. So check it out.
Matt.
Literary Hangover. Upcoming this weekend is going to be the Song of Hiawatha, a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. After that, it's going to be an essay for patrons of my Orweller series, George Orwell's Such Were the Joys, his time at private school, and also going to be in Rutger Bregman's Utopia for Realists in the coming months. Talk about UBI and this sort of promise and pitfalls of that policy.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Don't know how long I'm going to be able to go today. So I'm a little bit under the weather, as we've said earlier. But I will... 220? Exactly.
If you need to
Probably-
seek medical attention,
We've got that pre-taped.
do not
Yeah,
die
dude,
on
let's-
the air.
Yeah, please. Let's get out of here
It's
before we all
not
get
worth
sick.
it.
I can't believe.
Yeah,
I'm actually.
let's-
I don't
let's do
want
it for honestly for herd immunity. It's really important.
I'll finish the show for you. I don't care. I just really don't want to get sick.
Well, it's you're not going to get any less sick because I'm here 5 minutes later.
My throat.
I will remind you that was you, not only last week, but probably the week before
No.
and the week before.
No,
gonna
it's
come
not
in-
throat. It's
And the week before.
it's a migraine.
I'm going to come in one day and this entire area is going to be roped off as a biohazard zone.
Yeah, of course. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir? What is on your mind?
I'm good. Good interview with Eric LeBlanc. Good to see Bernie ahead of Biden, 30-26 in the latest change poll in New Hampshire, released just this morning, about an hour and a half ago.
You know, it's interesting
it's the
because
first poll.
It's interesting because you see, like I saw a poll today. What was it? Maybe the Morning Consult poll, and it did like the first 5 or 6 states. And you're like, wow, Biden's way up, but they don't really vote 5 states at a time. It's not the way that we distribute votes. But yeah, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Yeah, so this is the first poll, national or statewide, after the Biden announcement where Bernie leads. His lead is up from 2 points in the same pollster in early January. I agree with you that New Hampshire is an absolute must-win state for Bernie. So in light of the very real Biden polling surge, I keep repeating my mantra, it's super early, debates will move polls, Biden never gained traction in any of his other presidential runs, he's bad on the stump, he hasn't formulated concrete policy ideas. Fortunately, there's been a lot of denialism.
John, that is a very long mantra.
Okay.
Right,
yeah.
It is.
There's a lot of denialism by Bernie supporters on Twitter. It's a number. I'm a member of the Young Turks. I enjoy watching their show on an almost daily basis. But they put a segment up on Thursday on their website where it's called CNN Does a Hatchet Job Against Bernie, which has 97,000 hits. TYT also put this into a chyron where he added the word unethical. They also put into a chyron that poll sampled an insignificant number of voters under 50. Both the statements are false, and it's very disappointing that they didn't analyze the facts in a thorough manner. The first error is directly to blame CNN. They hired the pollster SSRS in August of 2017, but essentially they contracted them to do polls just like every other media pollster relationship, and they may fire them at their end of the contract. Just like they fired their previous polling partner of 10 years, ORC. So if you conduct polling, the most effective method is calling people on cell phones and having a smaller percentage of landlines. They cost a lot of money. So these polls close to elections usually have a sample size of 1,000 or more. Pollsters simply aren't going to spend that kind of money, for something so far away like the election. So because the SSRS sample size is so small, they don't want to include crosstabs or subgroups that have a small sample size. So here's the problem. If you aren't transparent about the numbers, people will misinterpret your results. So it's important, no matter how small the sample size is, to list percentages and subgroup crosstabs. So you have TYT saying that they sampled an insignificant group of voters under 50, and typical polling experts saying that they do nothing wrong without either really trying to decipher, which is actually what the numbers are for those under 45. According to SSRF methodology, they sampled 411 voters. If a subgroup receives less than 125 unweighted cases, or around 30%, they won't be included in their subgroup.
All right, John.
Instead,
John, we're getting a little bit weedy here. So the gist of it is what? That poll was not as shaky as it was reported by some.
Right. It wasn't shaky at all. But SSRS also made a mistake. They made two mistakes. One is they should publish this, because it leads people to misinterpret polls when you don't publish things, when you're not transparent. And the second thing is, even by their own transparency, by their methodology, their relationship would be 71% to 29%.
John, look, all right. So the gist of it is that Biden's up. It's not so, but it's also like your extended mantra. Too long of a mantra, frankly, John. I think you should shorten the mantra. But like your mantra said, it's early. I think, look, the real question to me with Joe Biden, and I certainly was a member of the Joe Biden is going to fizzle out within a couple of weeks camp, and I have had to move from that camp, is that, he is not the same guy who ran in 2008 because he has had 8 years of being Barack Obama's vice president. The question is when we get into the debates, because I think this is, we're going to see, he's got to bounce. I think it's going to come back to earth a little bit. And then we're going to get to the debate season where things are going to get a little bit more intense. The question is that in the context of the debates, does he come off as the Joe Biden that was rejected every time he ran for president? Or does he come off as this new Joe Biden who is a vestige of Barack Obama? And that is going to be the big question. And then I would say there's a subsidiary question too, which is, and I imagine you're going to see Bernie and Warren really keep this on a very specific policy level. And I imagine you're going to see a couple of others who are maybe somewhere in the middle, and then the others who are just like, this is a war for the soul of the country, and with a lot of platitudes. And it's going to be interesting to see how voters react to that. But I appreciate the call, John.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
I mean, I definitely think, I'm not sure how it'll be done, but I'm someone who's always thought Biden was very formidable, and, it would be just wrong to dismiss how strong a candidate he is for any number of reasons, including, by the way, I don't agree with John. I mean, I think I don't like to watch Biden give a speech because it's not my particular style, but I do think that his approach, resonates with people. But that being said, I do want to just say, I think to Sam's point a little bit, now we're on the other end of people a couple of weeks ago being like, oh, this is never going to happen, which I think was just not a real assessment of where he was coming from. Now, he's totally invincible, which I don't think is true either, right?
No. I mean, Joe Biden's populism is 100% affect. He is an affective candidate. And it's going to be very clarifying, I think, to see him have to debate with Bernie Sanders when you get down to the nitty-gritty of policy and see if that message carries forth to voters that one person is clearly more populist than the other.
Yeah, I mean, that presumes that people...
I'm also just talking style. I'm talking total substance-free presentation.
Yeah, but that presumes too that the American public is interested in something that is not affect.
Well, we're going to find out. That's what I'm saying.
But we'll see. It'll be interesting.
I think we also have to think though about the different types of affect that people are interested in, depending on where they're from and what their class background is. Right? I think I might be trying to circle a square a little bit, but I think like definitely people that I talk to who are not necessarily as political engaged, but are dealing with, real money issues are much more interested in the affect of I'm going to get you things than, abstractions. And I think, a lot of people in the media business are actually, and in sort of these more educated bubbles are much more interested in a different type of affect.
Well, I'm not going to get you things is not an affect. It's a policy, right? And then you can get more specific about it as you go.
Well, I mean, Trump did that affect, right? So, I mean, it can just be an affect. The question, I mean, whatever. I just think that Biden is formidable, but not necessarily as, now it's like we might be going the opposite correction is all I'm saying.
I am going to make the prediction that by September, Biden is either in third place or very close to third place.
Okay. Well, oh, by the way, you still haven't paid me on the Bernie bet, incidentally, speaking of your predictions.
What, that he wouldn't go into the race?
Yes.
What was the pay?
I think it was either $5 or $10. It wasn't that big,
well,
but it's still owed.
Saving up. Saving up for it right now.
Saving up? You should be able to.
Folks.
You should definitely be able to figure it out.
The Red Sox are still under 500. However, Alex Cora and two members of the Sox decided not to go, that they will not be going to the White House to celebrate last year's World Series ring with Donald Trump. However, one guy did decide to go, and that, of course, is Tiger Woods. He is back. He is a Republican through and through. And the Fox and Friends folks are really excited that Donald Trump knows some black guys.
Baltimore Sun headlines. Plenty of athletes are refusing to stand with Trump, not Tiger Woods, and they go on to tell why they shouldn't. In the op-ed, they said this: we wish Mr. Woods would have taken the stand against hatred and declined the award, given the racial and ethnic rift Mr. Trump has widened and exploited in the country since taking office. Mr. Woods has made his choice, and part of his legacy will be embracing a man who incited bigotry and racism. That is totally inaccurate to the person Tiger Woods knows. I also would say that people who would also think that's laughable is Darryl Strawberry, George Foreman, Herschel Walker, Ben Carson, Mike Tyson, just some of the people who happen to be black.
Pause it for 1 second. It sort of feels like he's going to list off just a list of athletes who are black. And I can't tell if it's like he's just going through a comprehensive list of black people who Donald Trump is acquainted with in some fashion, or if he thinks that Ben Carson's surgery is sporty in some way.
I used to play racquetball.
But it's
do
literally
you
like,
guys need me to make something
here?
up? I was a great squash champion because God told me the rules, and I stabbed some. It was at a competition, but then I won it, and I got a scholarship because of God. I got you guys. Whatever you need.
I love the variance on, like, some of my good friends are black to some of his good friends are black to some of the acquaintances he has are black.
A lot of the people I make appearances at charity events with are black.
There you go. Where's my black guy? I think he was famous for saying, too.
Where's my half black, half Asian guy?
The person Tiger Woods knows. I also would say that people who would also think that's laughable is Darryl Strawberry, George Foreman, Herschel Walker, Ben Carson, Mike Tyson, just some of the people who happen to be black.
Mike Tyson. You're bragging about your friendship with Mike Tyson. Not exactly the greatest of guys.
It's fun, though.
Who have met with the president and known him for a couple of decades and don't feel as though that description is accurate.
There you go.
They don't feel that description is accurate.
Oh, and I believe he said, where's my African American?
Is that what he said?
That is the politically correct way to say that a black person belongs to you.
Excuse me, you're supposed to say African American.
Yeah, you can't say black anymore.
Sam, you can't say, wow, look who says black. Sam Seder.
This
Total
is
bigot.
This is this story I found to be sort of the perfect metaphor for the right and for this era.
Microcosm is the word.
Yeah, I think it's metaphor. But yeah, I guess you could say it's also a microcosm in some way. There's this guy, Russell Bolton. As you can see here, he was a write-in candidate for sheriff in Stevens County, Washington. And he also was the head. Do we have a tear sheet from that old website? He was also the leader of the Stevens County Assembly. What would that be? Stevens County Assembly. Here's an old website. This one's and it says, welcome. The Stevens County Assembly is a volunteer independent body of God-fearing American citizens who have realized the changing conditions, seeking to prepare and equip all who will heed with the knowledge and ability to protect family and property, to secure real American communities during the present insurgent political and social change, and to reach out across our regions to like-minded patriots in order to strengthen our common cause. So they are a prepper organization that believes wholeheartedly in run-on sentences. And they also, they go on to say our website is designed for the serious patriot who doesn't like commas and who wishes to rise above the conditions and increase their critical thinking skills, not so much their grammar. We invite you to unite with us to uphold our United States Constitution and our God-given right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they were very concerned, of course, about the hordes of immigrants coming in, particularly all the the drug gangbangers and drug cartels that would come in.
The drug gangbang cartel. It's bad.
In fact, this group received a letter, not just a letter, but multiple letters from Alessio Don de Grande.
Wait,
well, that's a character.
Wait, excuse me. Alessio Don de Grande. You're not talking about the prominent Sinaloa Don. These poor local residents were getting a letter from him.
He's the Don of the Big.
Don of the Big.
And Alessio Don de Grande referenced his membership in a shadowy criminal enterprise, and he demanded $250,000 in cash within 15 days. And he had left a 2-page typed missive on the car windshield of members of this group, this right-wing militia. They sent several members of this group, got several threatening letters from De Grande, whose name was signed at the bottom of each. Don't get me in trouble with YouTube. He was heavily involved in a mysterious group outside of the United States, and insinuated it was a Mexican cartel. Well,
all prominent cartel heads are known for running multi-billion-dollar trafficking networks and also putting extortion threats on the windshields of minivans.
I sign every extortion threat. I promise to you, I sign every extortion threat. Well, it turns out that the sender was actually the leader of the militia group.
No.
Yes.
No honor amongst airhead fascists, huh?
James Russell Bolton basically tried...
Upcoming TMBS guest.
And here is of course, the perfect metaphor. He scares the members of his prepper cult, as it were, into believing that there are hordes of Mexican drug cartel members coming up into Washington State
And they know we're the last line of defense.
Exactly.
That is some.
We're the rear guard. They're going to come back up through Canada after they come at us at a frontal assault.
We got on the radar some bad hombres down there.
And so Bolton was trying to get money from these rubes that he had, in many respects, created. Does that sound familiar to you, ladies and gentlemen?
You know what? I got to tell you, you look at people and you think, if I wasn't doing what I would do what they do, and you say it in admiration. And if I wasn't a trust fund baby and I wasn't president, that's what I'd do.
Hey,
we
man.
were a superpower. We are now a hyperpower.
Respect the hustle. That's what I
Oh, are
say.
you kidding me? I love this guy.
Apparently, Bolton, when detectives called Bolton, the militia leader, Bolton claimed he and his wife had been receiving menacing phone calls too, but he had shaken it off because it was common in his line of work.
Oh, hell yeah!
Been at this a long time.
Asked if someone could be targeting the group for financial reasons, Bolton reportedly responded that the Stevens County Assembly had about $900 in its bank account. The mystery was still unsolved in March when Bolton called the sheriff's office to say he'd started getting threatening emails. He told detectives that a red Ford pickup had followed him home, and the passengers had yelled at him and run him off the road, which is a classic play
Another
by
classic tactic
Mexican
of the
cartels.
Mexican cartels. What you do is you drive a red Ford pickup truck to Washington State, and then you drive this hombre off the road.
It's unbelievable.
Gang shit.
Man, I say free him. By the way, if Donald Trump was truly respectful of his base, we always talk about how he serves his base. I could not think of literally a greater example of his base than this. This guy should get a full pardon.
He should be Secretary of State.
He's facing 5 counts of extortion in the first degree and 1 count of attempted theft in the first degree.
Free
Total
him.
witch hunt.
Total witch hunt. Total witch hunt.
That was just a funny story.
He's the cartel grande in the witch.
What was the name of the? We gotta remember the name.
Alicio Don Del Grande.
Don Del Grande.
Chalupa.
Should we watch his candidacy ad?
The third.
Yeah, let's just look at. Let's see how Russell Bolton did with his write-in candidacy for sheriff in Stevens County.
Hello, my name is Russell Bolton. I'm running for Stevens County Sheriff. Welcome to our website. Hope you'll find this very useful as you get more information about our program. We'd like you to take the time to sign up for email and information that you can receive. We certainly thank you for visiting today.
The right, I think, has finally found their AOC.
Yeah, I was going to say. Oh, no. Here's a Tostito sighting on the ground. They're coming, fellas. If you don't immediately deposit,
I don't want to
take out a line of credit or we'll be killed by the Grande cartel.
I don't want to scare you guys, but there's some Taco Bell bags in the dumpster outside.
I love him so much.
This guy's amazing. And you know what? He seems kind of good-natured. In a way.
I imagine.
He should team up
Not so
with
much.
No Bumps in the Road guy. They'd be unstoppable. That brain trust.
So speaking of witch hunt, Steve Mnuchin has denied a request from Congress. Richard Neal, a Democrat of Massachusetts, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Neal has been asking for Donald Trump's tax returns. Not a big story here. This is a big story. I mean, this is gonna go to court. You have Mnuchin responding that the request lacks a legitimate legislative purpose. Now, that is an interesting response since there is in no way do you need that legitimate purpose. That's just the fact. There is a statute that says Congress can request for any reason the taxes of an individual. So they have power to do this. It's just the law. But this will go. I imagine this might go to the Supreme Court.
Okay, I was staying in this position because we didn't want things to go off the rails. Okay, like I was leaking to the press that Donald Trump was actually an unstable wannabe dictator, and people said that I was staying in power just to reward myself money and corrupt deals from my own position. But what I was really doing was protecting democracy. Okay. Oh, his tax returns? No.
Yeah, remember the guy that was wrote that New York Times op-ed about how he's a mole inside the Trump White House and is protecting them from the...
Yes, I do remember that. Actually incredibly undemocratic. Like the one person that Donald Trump actually should drum out of the White House.
Is it maybe time for the New York Times to explain what was going on with that?
Yeah, maybe.
What, the op-ed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they're just hoping everyone was going to forget and move on, which we did.
But right, exactly. But do you remember specifically the story was that Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn and Mattis, right? They had this pact.
Yeah.
Right? So Cohen...
Why you would invite Mnuchin in on that pact if you're the other guys?
I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, one is almost certainly a war criminal. The other is like a Goldman Sachs guy, but at least they're like quasi-credible people, right? I mean, Mnuchin is not. Yeah. Mnuchin should be in jail if not for Kamala Harris choosing not to prosecute him. Right. Like, that story, I mean, the rounds of just like blatant, like, it was like they got together and they said, how about we all leak that we have public values together? Like, how about we all cover each other in a PR sense?
There's
no
doubt in my mind they did that in the moment. It's really just like that they don't. They just didn't. They just basically say, yeah, fuck, F it. I mean, we had that agreement, but let's screw it. We're done. I mean, whatever. That's
People change.
There you go.
Can't be rigid.
And this was the Teapot Dome. The law came out of the Teapot Dome. Oh, really? Yes.
Gonna bring that back.
What was the Teapot Dome?
It was like some Wyoming oil rights corruption scandal. Basically.
Yeah, it was like Mellon and some other guy, and I think Mellon was. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was
a bribery scandal involving the administration of Warren G. Harding from 1921 to 1923.
I feel like the tax thing, maybe I'm mistaken, but I feel like that this law came out of that.
Warren G. Harding was totally unfairly targeted.
I saw somebody else make the point that the Republicans forced Acorn to give over those sorts of documents, and Grass is like, well, that was meaningful, and this is...
It was about black people getting money for preschools and helping people register to vote. That was not about the President of the United States being a criminal.
There is
these
a
goddamn comparisons.
Very, very, I think, strong argument to be made. And I haven't seen anybody make it explicitly, but there's a very strong argument to be made that the destruction of Acorn was very much responsible for losses in places like Wisconsin,
definitely,
and Michigan,
and no strategy,
Pennsylvania. Allowing that organization was a big organizer for people of low income, and you need to have resources, and you need to have these type of networks if you're going to bring people out to vote, at the very least.
And the Obama administration is just like, major network on behalf of poor people and our get out to vote efforts, or a video from an obscure, disturbed right-wing kid on them. Whoop! Shut it down.
I listened to the most recent Rubin report. It's with James O'Keefe talking about the media, and that's still the feather in his cap. Is like, we got Obama and the Congress to take action on it.
It is a big feather in his cap
because they had to do something about Acorn. Where did they come up with that name? Did they like squirrels? No, that was just a joke.
Colin from an
workshopping
845.
New material.
What was that? What was that? What was we were saying before the show?
I have a theory that Dave Rubin is microdosed with LSD before every interview. That's why it blows his mind.
So I suggest it's really where it's a Zoolander situation. And Dave is just if we ever get if we ever get Dennis Prager away from him, who's clearly the Will Ferrell character in this scenario, he'll just be like, I don't want to kill this. I don't want people to live in Ethno State. That's mean. We're all my old friends. No wonder Anna Kasparian hates me so much. Oh no! What have I done? You mean, I thought you meant like a state where everybody gets along and there's daycare for all the kids who come from everywhere.
Almost think you've literally just written a movie that could be a huge hit.
Let's do it.
I'm not
even kidding.
Calling from an 845 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Keaton. I'm calling from Beacon, New York, up in the Hudson Valley.
Keaton from Beacon, New York, home of the Dia Museum.
Exactly, yes, home of the Dia Museum. Very good. You lived up in the Hudson Valley, right, for a while?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Well, anyway, yeah. Okay. Okay. So the reason I'm calling is, I love John from San Antonio, and I don't want to criticize his mantra, because I know mantras could be hard to come by, and that one seemed like a particularly hard one to memorize. But to me, the most troubling sign of in the polling is not so much that Biden is ahead, but that poll after poll consistently shows that the Democratic primary voters are so much less concerned with the policy substance of these candidates as they are with the quote-unquote electability of the candidates. And so I don't know how much room that gives us to work with.
Well, I mean, look.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so what if
I know
Bernie
what you're
kicks his
saying.
ass in the debate? So what?
Well, the idea is this: is that what constitutes electability? I mean, if you were to sat down with every one of those voters who say it, it's just because he's likable and he can relate to people. But it's quite possible that in the context of a debate stage, he could come off as a jerk. I mean, that he could come off as, there's a whole, I mean, I would imagine the concept of electability is a very vague one. And it really just comes down to whether you like him or you think other people would like him. And, there's a lot of cues in a debate when there's 9 people on stage and there's an audience there and there's people who are asking questions. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that, a Biden is going to look like look, here's the question. If Elizabeth Warren says, Joe, I like you, but people are going to have a real problem when they find out that you were basically championing the credit card companies, because people don't like credit card companies. They don't like.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I actually have a lot.
Let me finish here.
I actually have a lot more confidence in her to hammer him than I do in Bernie. Actually.
Well, who knows? I'm just giving an example, but that benefit may go to any of the other candidates, even if Elizabeth Warren is the one delivering it. But the question is is Joe Biden going to be able to stand up there if Elizabeth Warren, if any of the other candidates say, like, look, I'm in the pocket of Wall Street, but you supported the credit card companies and made bankruptcy basically like a life sentence for people. Why is it, Joe, that you thought that corporations should have their debts relieved in bankruptcy, but not homeowners or students? I mean, why is?
But don't you worry? Sorry, don't you worry that the Democratic primary electorate is so conditioned in this sort of third way mentality that they might say, yeah, you're right about all that, but the country is just part of the center.
No, I don't think.
You don't think so? Okay.
I don't think the Democratic.
I hope you're right.
I don't think. I think it's a little bit less, frankly, sophisticated than that. I mean, I don't think that I don't think there's a third way mentality amongst the Democratic voters. If anything, I think it's just like, I think it's just not deep sophistication on those issues.
Third way candidates like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama won because they're Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, not because of an ideological profile.
Yeah, but
they
people
have incredible charisma.
Well, they also got a little bit populist during those.
That's
those
absolutely
campaigns.
true. Well, that was the second point that I wanted to make. Actually, exactly right. Is that it's actually the inverse. It's that both the candidates that they always herald in this third way consensus are enormously charismatic and capable politicians. And secondly, I mean, even if you go back to Obama in 2007 and 2008 against Clinton, he thematically ran to her left. And he not only talked obviously about Iraq, but he hit her on credit cards and bankruptcy. He talked about trade, which he was definitely like lying about contemporaneously, but he still talked about it. And so I think what might happen in the debates, though, is that some of this distinction between and I think it is worth noting, Matt Karp did say that 75% of Democratic primary voters in the same poll that Biden's crushing it do say that it's quote unquote very important for Democratic candidates to back Medicare for all. And I think the debate is the opportunity where you start to bring these things together, likability, popularity, and policy, and they get mushed together in ways that might be effective.
Okay.
Let me quote my own tweet from May 4th. Eventually, Democratic primary voters will meet the real Joe Biden versus the guy they think is Joe Biden. And
right.
and that's really that is really what has to happen in the debate. I think people will reference policies in that regard, but there's a presumption, I think, by a lot of people in the Democratic Party as to who Joe Biden is, and I don't think that I don't even think Joe Biden is going to attempt to be that guy. And I think so the American public, just when they hear Joe Biden, they hear Barack Obama's vice president. He's been there. He's Uncle Joe. Everybody loves Joe. But when you start to get exposed to Joe Biden, there's a reason why he flailed in every other time he ran for president.
Yeah, you start to feel a little bit icky,
But we'll see.
Maybe there's
but what
a
might
hand
be
on your
unique this
back.
time, don't you think, is the fear of a Trump second term? Like
Well,
people
yes,
might
no,
just
but-
be
but-
so.
But dude, listen,
so weakened by that.
Listen. I mean, I think I understand the idea of worrying, but there's only so much you can break this down. Yes, I think, and I predicted this 2 years ago, that after 4 years of Donald Trump, the Democratic voter, the number one thing they're going to want to do is just get rid of Donald Trump. But what they think is going to do that and achieve that is still up for grabs. And that is going to be formulated as they see the candidates. We are a year out from this thing being even remotely close to being effectively over. It very well may not be. We may be waiting until June for this thing to be over. But we'll see. Appreciate the call.
I kind of agree. Like, I'm looking at a 538 article right now containing a poll that says Democrats care more about winning than usual. Winning being electability. There's still plenty of time to define what electability means, like you said, but it's a front that we can't totally cede if we're going to meet people where they are. If this is a thing people really care about, we have to make some arguments along those lines if we want people to be convinced that Bernie's electable. And one thing that I always point to is showing how well Jeremy Corbyn did in the UK elections. And this is a country that also just voted for Brexit, right? Like, they are not more progressive than us in any way, really. And, it's not an exactly analogous situation. But Jeremy Corbyn did very well, despite being opposed by all of the Labour Party and the mainstream media.
With all
and
due respect,
a lot of people came out to vote who don't normally vote. And it was a lot of poorer people and people of color and young people.
With all due respect to the Democratic electorate, I can tell you what 85% of them will say when you say Jeremy Corbyn shows you the way, and they're going to go, who? What? Jeremy Corbyn, what? I think it's just going to be a question of when Joe Biden actually gets exposed as a candidate, as opposed to the former VP. And, in some ways, it's sort of surprising because I really do think that The more I think about it, that by the fall he's going to be, but who knows? But Hillary Clinton was also, her favorability was through the roof before she started campaigning, because you see someone in a role where they're not actively trying to convince you of something. And it's different than when you know that they're coming to try and sell you something.
Although that is how he's campaigning, and that's another thing that will be
But
interesting.
he's not going to be able to do that in the debates.
It's going to be right. I mean, those are obviously the real crucial moments, and that's also really. I'm thrilled that Bernie came out immediately and started talking about his trade record. I really do think that trade is a great bridge between wonkery and something that people don't really get the details of, but they do generally know.
I think
that stuff
trade,
like
yes.
NAFTA
I mean,
is
TPP,
bad for them. TPP is bad for
problem.
them. PNTR is bad for them.
But I also think that I think the credit card thing.
Also, the credit card thing too, because that's literally in your wallet. I mean, that's
credit card.
I totally agree with that as well. I think trade and credit cards, he's left himself. I mean, that is an advantage, right? It isn't like some horrible. It isn't like Glass-Steagall or something, which is very important and so on. But those are like pretty visceral things for people that don't require much explanation.
Literally pocketbook issues.
Yes, right.
Yeah, trade is going to be really good for Bernie in the primary and in the general, right? Because he has a left critique of globalization that none of the other candidates have. He can show that he is actually a populist and cares about your jobs, and Joe Biden was totally complicit in NAFTA and all that shit. And then running against Trump, he can show that Trump's economic populism is totally phony because Trump wants basically NAFTA 2.0.
I also think, I mean, look, it's more specialized, but especially in light of the Sandra Bland thing, which I know you want to transition to, Joe Biden's criminal justice record should be returned to often on the politics and the merits.
Yeah, this is pretty disturbing. I think most people recall the story of Sandra Bland. This was now, I guess, 4 years ago that Sandra Bland had been pulled over in Texas. She was, I believe, en route to classes. She was 28 years old. She was from Chicago. Oh no, excuse me. She had a new job, and she was, I think, just starting the job or just headed there. 28 years old, from Chicago in southeast Texas. This is in 2015. She was taken into custody for a traffic stop. 3 days later, she was hanging in a jail cell in what was officially ruled a suicide. This obviously was a flashpoint, one of them, for Black Lives Matter. The trooper, my understanding, ended up being charged just with lying, but there was no charges. He made a false statement to a grand jury. Throughout the whole thing, he said the reason why he brought her in was because he felt like he was in jeopardy, like. A mortal jeopardy, or his safety was in jeopardy. This guy was charged, but he was not convicted. The state trooper, I think he was, or the cop, and he was then, I believe, ultimately banned from being a cop. But that was about it. There is a video that has now been obtained by a local television station. I believe it was a local television station that did some type of Freedom of Information Act. It was the TV station is WFAA, and or maybe they just did this through investigating. I'm not exactly sure how they got the video, but apparently was the video on her phone that the police, and they released the trooper's dash cam video. But the video that she recorded makes it very, very clear that he should have had any reason to fear for his life. Here is that video. It's very short. It's only 35 seconds. Clearly what happened is he's like telling her to get out of the car. And at that point she realizes, like, I'm going to videotape this. And she starts the video, and you will hear him basically pull his taser out, claim that he's going to light her up. And it is, I mean, he's aware that it's a phone because he's like, stop recording. So here is this video.
Get out of the car now.
Why am I being apprehended? You trying to give me a ticket for your failure?
Get out of the car.
Why am I being apprehended? You just opened my car door. You just opened my car door. So you threatening to drag me out of my own car.
Get out of the car.
And then you
I
gonna
will
stun
light
me?
you up. Get out.
Wow.
Now.
Wow.
Get out of the car.
Really, for a failure to signal. You doing all of this for
Get
a failure
over
to
there.
signal. Right, yeah. Yeah, let's take this to court. Let's do
Go
it.
ahead.
For a failure to signal. Yep, for a failure to signal.
Get off the phone.
On my school.
Get off the phone.
I'm not on the phone. I have a right to
Put your
record. This
phone
is my
down.
property. This
Put
is
your
my
phone
property.
down.
Sir?
Put your phone down right now.
Now, I guess this guy could claim like somehow before that he felt like he was afraid for his safety. But what's clear is he did not pull that taser out because he feared for his safety. I mean, we can see the moment that the taser comes out, and it's inspired not by her doing anything that was threatening. He doesn't say, drop the phone at that point. He doesn't say, like, he just says, get out of the car. He was clearly not afraid for his safety. He was clearly mad that this passenger of the car was questioning the legitimacy of him pulling her over. And the family is calling for a reopening of the investigation. And it's pretty hard not to wonder, you know, if the cop is that aware that he was lying big time. If the police department was aware that this evidence, this video in some way was problematic, I don't see how they don't reopen this investigation. And it's pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking that they've had this for 4 years and didn't release it.
I mean, it is, but also it isn't, because we know how things are in this country, and the cops have too much power over regular people, and we live in a very white supremacist country still.
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that we heard at that time quite a bit from members of this audience who were in law enforcement was that the biggest problem is with the prosecutors, because you're always going to have cops who are inclined to abuse their power and cops who are racist, but you need prosecutors to basically say, you can't get away with it. And this, wow. I mean, it is shocking that they thought they could keep that video from getting out.
Yeah, and they should, I mean, just societally speaking, I think police department should feel lucky that there isn't more unrest because of this stuff than there is.
Absolutely.
You kidding
There
me?
should be more.
Right.
There will be more.
Speaking of unrest, this is also disturbing. Mike Pompeo has been out there talking about Iran. There's a video going around. I'm not quite sure where he was talking about that. But we know that John Bolton issued a statement. And I spoke to Trita Parsi, who will be on Ring of Fire this weekend, briefly about this. And we have, and he literally wrote the book on losing an enemy, about the negotiations that led to the Iran deal and the implications of it. And we have seen over the past month, first, the designation of the Iranian National Guard, the Iranian, the Quds Force, I guess it was, as a terrorist organization. We then see the movement of another carrier group into the Straits of Hormuz. And I think it was just a day or two ago, the waivers on some of the sanctions that were granted expired. There will be more waiver sanctions expiring soon. And the theory is this, is that Donald Trump may not want a war with Iran, but he also didn't like the Iran deal because Obama did it. He may see a war with Iran as being a hindrance to his reelection campaign because he supposedly ran against dumb wars. However, there is a complete vacuum in the White House and in the executive branch in terms of voices that might, because you'll recall there was a lot of people in the administration who were trying to get him not to leave the Iranian deal. Those voices are all gone. They were ineffectual. There is no Secretary of Defense. We don't have one. We see more and more people leaving the Pentagon. Those are the people who would say, hey, we can't win a war with Iran. What you do have is John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, who are probably telling the president, this is what you need to do to look strong. And the only thing that I could say is in terms of like an analogy here is Bolton is trying to put this on autopilot. It's like he's taking a brick and he's tying it to the gas pedal of a car. Right. And he's saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't need a driver now. It's just going to go forward. So we're going to put ourselves in a position where something will go wrong. And it will force some type of conflict that will spiral into a war, because John Bolton is a lunatic. And this is something that this has been his project for decades now. Here is Senator Angus King from the Armed Services Committee. I think not speaking forcefully enough if you want to prevent this type of thing, because King has got to convince at least some members of the Republican Party that this is not good for them electorally. Right. So that somebody walks down the street and says to Donald Trump, hey, I'm not sure that John Bolton is the guy you can trust here. I know he was on Fox News and all, but here's Angus King.
I don't usually read things on television, but I want to read something that I think may put this into important context. This is John Bolton in 2017, 2 years ago, just before he became National Security Advisor. He says the outcome of the president's policy review should be to determine that the Ayatollah Khomeini's 1979 revolution will not last past its 40th birthday, which, by the way, was this past February. The declared policy of the United States should be the overthrow of the mullahs regime in Tehran. The behavior and the objectives of the regime are not going to change, and therefore the only solution is to change the regime itself. And that's why before 2019, we here will celebrate in Tehran. You take that sentiment and add to the fact that we've drastically increased the sanctions on Iran. We've just declared the Quds Force a terrorist organization. We're moving carriers. I have this creepy feeling that this is weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that there are motions toward a confrontation with Iran that it would be It would be a very, very serious conflict. When I was over there...
Hang on 1 second, though. You don't think that Iran poses a threat to U.S. interests in the region? Because if you're making the weapons of mass destruction comparison...
Now, pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. Like, there's a lot of qualifications to that statement, right? You don't think Iran is posing a threat to U.S. interests in the region. Like, first of all, it's pretty dubious as to what our interests in that region are in the first place. Second of all, it is pretty dubious to say that they're necessarily expansionary as opposed to involved in a surrogate war with Saudi Arabia. And nevertheless, you also have to argue that there's no other means in which to contain Iran's aspirations to the extent that they have any other than being able to sell their oil.
Can I just add, too, just how unbelievably dangerous and stupid that framing is. I'm just going to quote briefly. This is Paul Pillar in Low Blog. He's a former CIA analyst. And he says, basically, naked aggression as a means of starting such a war, it's a piece called Bolton's War, may be too much for even Bolton to pull off. So the strategy has been to try to pressure and goad Iran into doing something, anything, that could be construed as a casus belli. So, just even the frame of that question leads directly to the scenario they're trying to set up.
I would also add,
be more dangerous.
I would also add, the idea that Bolton and Pompeo are going around saying, we're getting a lot of chatter.
That's it.
There's a lot of chatter. Well,
it was the reporter from CNN who did that credulously yesterday, the same reporter who fed the Iraq intel.
Right.
What was her name
of chatter. Barbara Starr. Yeah, there's a lot of chatter out there. We can't be specific about it. And it turns out that the chatter was literally an Israeli report that laid out possible things Iran could do. That's not chatter. That's a rival speculating as to what could happen. But here we go. This is the way you, if you don't march to war, this is the way that you back into a war.
It would be a very, very serious conflict. When I was over there...
Hang on 1 second, though. You don't think that Iran poses a threat to U.S. interests in the region? Because if you're making the weapons of mass destruction comparison, there weren't weapons of mass destruction.
I don't want to go that far. Clearly, they're a malicious actor, and they have Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they're affiliated with Hamas. I'm not saying they're good guys by any means. But the question is, are we taking steps that are going to lead us toward a war?
Yeah. Are we taking steps that's going to lead us towards a war? And I think that answer is yes.
And also just even we need to start having an honest conversation about Iran, which is are there internal human rights abuses? Absolutely. They pale in comparison to Saudi Arabia, but sure, they exist and we should be able to talk about them. That's fine. Then there's the fact that, yes, actually Iran, I think along with everyone else, has played a questionable role in Syria, but they're synchronized with us against ISIS. And in Yemen, we're barely backing a group that Saudi Arabia has used as an excuse to. I think at this time you can use the word genocide as to what's happened in Yemen. So even just buying that, mostly what Iran is doing is their foreign ministers flying to China and Europe and India to try to preserve the greatest diplomatic success of our modern time.
Yep. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo, not enough to help stoke a war, or at least stumble into a war with Iran, or to completely screw up, even in their own internal logic, the attempt to for regime change in Venezuela. That did not go well for Mike Pompeo. There's nothing that I don't think America has nearly as much of a problem with interfering in other people's elections and leaderships as they should. But the one thing that America doesn't like is a totally incompetent imperialist.
Well, if at first you don't succeed.
Right, exactly. We're going to keep trying. But Mike Pompeo has some good news. Where others see a crisis, as in like the demise of potentially civilization as we know it because of global warming, other people see an opportunity. Here he is telling the Arctic Council in Finland about such a dynamic.
The Arctic is at the forefront of opportunity and abundance. It houses 13% of the world's undiscovered oil, 30% of its undiscovered gas, and an abundance of uranium, rare earth minerals, gold, diamonds, and millions of square miles of untapped resources. Fisheries galore. And its centerpiece, the Arctic Ocean, is rapidly taking on new strategic significance. Offshore resources, which are helping their respective coastal states, are the subject of renewed competition. Steady reductions in sea ice are opening new passageways and new opportunities for trade. This could potentially slash the time it takes to travel between Asia and the West by as much as 20 days. Arctic sea lanes could come the 21st century Suez and Panama canals.
Okay, first off, it's incredible because this guy is reading it. It's as if it's the first time he's ever read this stuff. He is bragging about the melting of all the glaciers and the opportunities that are going to be involved there. Because of all this melting, we're going to be able to get all sorts of like oil and gas and minerals.
Yeah, there's treasures in there hidden by all that damn ice.
And this is also where we're all going to live. At least some of us, the lucky ones.
Isn't it? I can't get the number in front of me, but like even just I want to zero in on like, isn't it really commonly established that like global fisheries are already like, mined and fished at such a rate that fish as a species might be wiped off of the earth?
Because you're presuming we won't be able to fish
we won't
up
be
in
able
the
to melt
Arctic
enough.
where
Like,
we're going to be
think
able
about
to,
all the places that'll be thawed.
Yeah, that's what that was.
No, I'm not. I know. He's like an evil Chris Farley character. Like if Chris Farley played a real evil son of a bitch, that would be Mike Pompeo.
It's just like the classic, like, hey, look at this. It's February and it's 70 degrees in New York City. I think I'm liking this global warming.
That's the dumb like lunch pail version of it. That's
Right.
Say, like,
that
there's
global
gold,
warming,
there's diamonds, there's fucking fish. You kidding me?
Oh my God.
Yeah, we went from first it's a Chinese hoax to this is a fucking Chinese opportunity.
Chinese bonanza.
Chinese bonanza. Oh.
I mean, the sad part is this guy will never suffer any of the consequences.
Now, do you guys
from
want to
climate
talk about
change.
new fishing opportunities? You're going to ask me another friggin' whiny pussy question about the journalist that was buzzsawed in the embassy. Come on,
Exactly.
everybody.
Calling from a 989 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 989.
989, what up?
What's up? Who's this?
Oh, it's Bob. How you doing, man?
Good. Where are you calling from, Bob?
Bob, I'm calling from Saginaw, Michigan, but I'm wondering why this guy's an asshole about fish.
About which guy?
Me or Mike Pompeo?
The guy that thinks that you shouldn't have fish.
Right. All right, Bob. Anything else to add, or? You got
Well,
anything?
no, I can add a lot more, man.
Yeah.
Am I live?
Yeah.
Take your time.
Shit. I'm checking it out. I like fish. I think the other guy's an asshole.
Yeah. Which one? Pompeo?
Are you talking about melting ice? Glaciers and deep thaw? No, I'm not live, fucker.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
Yeah, you should wait a second. You're gonna hang up on this guy after look at all the people you let go on forever. You can't give him a chance.
Yeah,
Bob.
throw me a bone, Sam.
No,
Come
no,
on.
I went to see if I was live, but I wasn't live. So I was like, fuck, that's stupid. But I was like, it's glacier. Didn't respond. So, I like ice glaciers.
Yeah,
This is good, Sam.
Bob,
you need to have
anything
more.
else?
You need to
Anything
hear
else
more
you wanna-
from the middle of the country. Get a sense of what's really on people's minds.
Anything else?
Dude, I'm with you guys, man. We were going toe to toe. You're like, hey, Obama, Trump has got a bunch of herpes. Now we're figuring it out a little bit.
Yes, King.
This is such a good call. And Sam looks uncomfortable. Oh yeah, if this guy called up and he was just like, "Oh, I can't hear what you're saying, but kids shouldn't have food," Sam would be like, "Oh really? Let's talk about that for 45
I
minutes."
never said that shit, man.
Okay.
Everyone climb
Am I
aboard the
right?
water boat. This will be the rest of the show.
Yeah, he never said that shit.
It's not even. Is it barely noon there? That's the only. Calling from a 281.
Oh, what are you
area
saying
code.
that he should get
Calling
a
from
job,
281.
Sam?
That's not what I'm saying.
Get
Calling
a
from a
job.
281 area code. Who's this? 281 area code.
Hello?
Hello? Who's this?
This is Anthony from College Station.
Hi, Anthony. What's on your mind?
I know kind of the standard position for Democrats is to support net neutrality, but I'm wondering if any of the candidates have kind of made it a central issue.
No.
I know that I actually haven't read it yet, but I have a piece tucked that actually might even be another question mark around Biden. That's all I know.
Oh yeah,
I don't
yes,
know
he
enough
actually
about it.
was,
I just
pretty
saw that.
skeptical of it back when Obama was trying to pass it.
Yeah.
Or well, encouraging the FCC to pass it.
I think that'll come up, but I just have a feeling that that's just not a core issue in the Democratic primary. I mean, I just don't think that is. But it
Bernie
may come
has
up.
a great history on telecommunication. I saw Bernie speak in college, and he talked about the '96 Telecommunications Act and media monopolies drowning out independent voices, and even arms manufacturers owning conglomerates. So I mean, I'm sure Bernie's going to have a great policy shop on this stuff. But yeah, I don't think.
I mean, that is a good take. If you were to have more numerous ISPs, net neutrality would be less of an issue.
Yep.
My next question is, I wonder, so I was visiting some family in East Texas, and they kind of stereotypically were quite fixated on how much welfare was going into cities with my wife, with my in-laws. And I'm wondering if anyone has ever kind of made some sort of comparative study on the amount of money going on a per capita basis to urban to rural areas.
Well, I'm sure
I pay more for my mail.
Yeah, I'm sure
so they can have it cheaper.
Yes,
I
I'm
pay
sure.
more on my internet
Yes.
so they can have cheaper.
Okay. Yes, I am sure that. I mean, well, that what you're talking about is slightly different dynamic. But yes, of course, cities subsidize rural things when it comes to things like internet and whatnot, because the dollar per capita is much cheaper to wire a city. But certainly, I'm sure someone's done that study. But certainly, if you look at the more rural states, are far more supported in terms of federal tax dollars than the more populous states. I mean, without a doubt, it's not even close. And so that dynamic is clear. But good luck with getting your. I have a feeling they are they're saying the quiet part's quiet when they say they have a problem with the cities getting that money.
Well, I don't know how much time you spend in East Texas, but the quiet part's not always so quiet there.
Well, my guess is yes. I was just being polite to
Going back to Texas.
Appreciate the
Sam
call.
goes about once a month just to clear
College
his mind.
Station?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome back to
Is this where the
College
Junction
Station.
Boys were at?
Let's go to. Here is the Fox folks talking about Bernie Sanders' interview on ABC this week. They're the way they've been spinning this too. There was a situation where he was asked, like, will you commit to having a female vice president of color? And he said, well, I'm obviously, more than open about that, but it's silly to talk about it right now, to commit to vice president. Nobody's going to do that.
Correct answer.
Which, of course. But people are trying to spin that in a way. It's sort of interesting to watch that. But here is the Fox and Friends crew bringing on the expert. Of course, I'm talking about Stuart Varney, to talk to them about what socialism is.
Meanwhile, we're capitalistic. Some folks who want to be president have talked about the wonders of socialism. Bernie Sanders was asked about that. Listen to this, Stuart.
Okay. Trump seems to want to run against you, and certainly he wants to run, and Republicans want to run against socialism.
Okay.
Is it time for you to disavow that label?
The problem is, and on a television interview, it's hard for me to describe in depth what we mean by that.
So
why
if
should
he
you walk
can't-
away from it?
If he can't describe it, can you?
Oh, yes.
Please
How much
do.
time you got? Okay, number one.
Pause it. The funny part is how much time you got is exactly the
What
point
Bernie
that
said.
Bernie was saying. We don't have much time. We're in this brief television interview. But here's Stuart Varney. He's going to give a shot anyways. Here it is.
Okay, number one.
45 seconds.
Socialism means high taxes for everyone. Socialism means the confiscation of wealth. Have you listened to Senator Elizabeth Warren? We're just going to take it off you. Not a tax. We're just going to take your wealth.
Pause it.
Socialism.
Actually, no. It is a tax. We're going to take your wealth. And so far, he's right.
Isn't that what taxes do?
Exactly. Socialism means a higher tax rate. That is true. And socialism does mean that if you are obscenely wealthy, you will have that money taxed away from you. Continue.
Wealth. Socialism means control of health care. Medicare for all, no private
You're
insurance.
making the point why Bernie didn't want to say these things on TV.
Pause it. That is not control of health care. That is control of the payments for health care. That's a difference. One's insurance. One is actually the delivery of health care. It is actually widening access and making it cheaper and easier to get health care.
TV. Control of education. Control of the banks.
Pause it.
Control.
Control of education would be like something like public schools. And to the extent that Sanders would get more involved in this, a Sanders or a socialistic government would just simply mean that we're going to equalize the funding so that everyone has access to good schools and well-funded schools, and that schooling is not limited just to K through 12, but it may be pre-K with an option to go to university or college.
Businesses, government control over everything, collective control over our society, as opposed to what we've got, capitalism,
I've heard it being
individual
described-
liberty and freedom.
I've heard it described as stealing. You make the
yes,
money, and
I
I'm going
would.
to steal it from you.
I would describe it exactly so.
Pause it. How is our current tax regime not stealing if a tax regime that taxes 5, 10, 15% more of the wealth stealing? That would be the question I would ask if I was allowed in that building, which I am not.
Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren, wants to take 2% of your wealth over a certain level. You've built it up. You've worked all your
Over a
life.
certain level. Over a
you
certain
built
level.
it up.
Does anybody know what there's like tens of millions of dollars?
I think it's $50 million.
Yes.
Oh, it wasn't $10.50.
Yeah, it was like
I read that
if
wrong.
you've even got $20 in
Over a
the bank
certain
account,
level-
I want to take that.
So over a certain level, I'm not going to say the number because I don't want to make anyone vomit out there to realize how much money they don't have. But
You built it up. She wants to take 2% per year right off you. Skim it off the top. It's not a tax. It's confiscation. Just that's socialism.
It's just
You
amazing.
see I'm getting worked up here?
Yeah, it's amazing to see an anchor try to push Bernie Sanders to disavow socialism. Why should he do that?
Yeah, why?
He's trying to say, I want you to win, Bernie, just to give up to socialism.
Please give it
I
up.
think you're right.
It's unbelievable.
Stop
Exactly
it,
how I'd
Bernie.
read
You're
that
losing.
All right, Stuart's got to
Let
work
me
from
tell you
9
how
to
to
noon.
win, Bernie.
yeah.
That's exactly how I would read that interview. Was
Yeah.
Carl was saying, Bernie, I'm a Bernie bro. I want everybody to have health care. You've made obviously the moral case for completing the New Deal and a fully revitalized American democracy, but I'm just really concerned about the socialism word.
Yeah, this but unironically.
And Bernie was just like, look, I don't think I have time to explain why I want rich people to personally suffer and that I resent and hate all forms of work. And that I admire both Stalin and Mao as historical figures. We don't really have time for that. So let me get back to why I think we need to break up agri-monopolies.
It's funny how they move from, instead of saying, a collective control, the opposite of is controlled by capitalists, but instead they say individual liberty, because they know if you said controlled by capitalists who just happen to own this shit, that would not be popular.
Yeah, like,
right, liberty to have control over others.
How much freedom do most of the people watching this think they have at work, right? Like it's not a choice between the government controlling things and you controlling things. It's being presented here.
Yeah, I want the ability to bump up the price of EpiPens from $17 to like $500 because I'm Joe Manchin's daughter.
Freedom.
Like, I am a libertarian socialist, but I would rather have the state deal with these things than private companies. And I would rather have the workers control them than anything, but at least the state is hypothetically democratic.
Now, one of the things that I think is going to make it very difficult for Democrats to win in 2020 is their avowed policy of infanticide. There's some people who would argue that maybe we should expand this infanticide to full-grown children. Depending on whether they are willing to go to bed when you ask them to or not.
Did you read Beto O'Rourke's policy proposal, children? It's the first one he's on record as, and I have to say, I'm seriously looking at it.
Dennis Prager is really getting trotted out quite a bit. Is he on like his last? This sort of feels like he might be on like his last hurrah.
You mean like because he looks so ill?
No, just like we're seeing a lot more. He's trying to get out there more. And he's just like, if I don't do it now.
I was thinking this is the Dennis Prager come up. He's finally like becoming the star he was always destined to be.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, you guys thought I was a has-been, but you never realized I was a never was. And here he is.
Look, we.
Nope. Let's try that one more time. We got tech problems with that one?
We have those.
Okay, we will endeavor to persevere. Let's go to the phones calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 610? 610?
Bob. Is that you?
Gone. Go into a 703 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Nathan in Virginia.
Nathan in Virginia. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm enjoying the conversation today. I was going to lead in with this is the Grande bit, but kind of
I'm glad you
lost
didn't.
it there.
I'm glad you didn't.
You should go for it, sir. Don't let Sam intimidate you.
Actually, what I really want to know, or some feedback from you guys, I'm on the right side of the political spectrum. Yes, is how I self-identify. And I, along with some other of my compatriots, do kind of see systemic problems with unregulated capitalism. But to a certain extent, there is this weird, like that Stuart Varney clip talking about socialism. It's sort of like we need to. I feel like this is the conversation I'm trying to have on my side here, but we need to really kind of drill down to. I think that buzzword of free market. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think free markets exist because markets have to exist in the context of societies and rules and laws, and you can't like sell cereal with rat poop in it, right? So we technically don't live in a quote unquote. Could you guys talk a little bit about that? Or
well, I mean, I've said for forever that free markets do not exist. That is a fallacy. Markets only exist really because as a function of government, and there is once a market is created. And once you establish any even the concept of like, hey, if someone, well, first off, money exists because of government. But
Right.
you know, and the idea that money is going to have value is completely a function of government, and the idea, all the rules around that implicate the market and the access to resources. You know, there's some type of assumption that because you have a lot of money, you should necessarily have a lot of resources. I mean, that's just simply a choice that we make. That's a political choice that we make, and that defines the dynamic in a marketplace. I mean, you know, if you're coming to me to work on my show and you have no money, and I don't, you know, and I have, and there's a large swath of people who have no money, I have a lot of leverage. That's not a, you know, the idea that somehow government policy or, you know, other things haven't implicated that dynamic is just simply false. And so it's really just a question of who we structure a market to benefit in any given point. And once that is accepted, then it just becomes an argument as to, you know, some people say we should structure markets to reward a narrow group of people, and based upon, you know, these attributes. And other people say we should structure markets in such a way to benefit a wider group of people.
Yeah, it goes to the fundamental question of what does a market exist to serve, right?
What's a society exist to serve is really what it comes down
to.
Well, yeah, and also
how did we get? You know, sorry, Jamie, cut you off.
If capitalism is supposed to be built on all these voluntary associations and decisions made by individuals operating at perfect liberty, wouldn't these people want to give people things like housing and healthcare so that they can make a truly free decision of where they want to work and what they want to do?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much of if it was, you know, some sort of idealized historical fiction from my past, but I do remember being told that, you know, when Henry Ford first started, you know, kind of cranking things up, people were asking, why are you paying the average Ford worker
because they're
more
smart.
than because I wanted them to buy my cars.
Yes.
You know.
Wait, now Nathan, did
It
you
just
say that
makes
you
sense.
are on the right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
that's how I identify.
what makes you identify that way? What is it your belief that that makes you identify that way?
No, because I really think the term conservative got kind of co-opted by a bunch of, and I didn't really like using this term before, but as time's going on, like, you know, by a bunch of opportunistic fascists.
Agreed.
You know, this was originally supposed to be, you know, like Teddy Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln, and we're going to ensure that, you know, the government's there to protect you from. That's going to protect the environment. It's going to protect the individual. You know, it's supposed to, because like you just said, Sam, what's society for if it's not for the betterment of everybody?
So what in conservative
I personally
ideology, as it is today? I mean, you know, Roosevelt was 100 years ago. What is it in conservative ideology today that makes you identify in that way?
Very, very, very little. I guess to me, I do kind of, I feel that there's a lot of space that's been created over, especially this, you know, the current administration in the last 20 to 30 years, to where, you know, we can kind of leverage back the Republican, well, hopefully leverage back the Republican Party.
Who are you planning on voting for?
Corporate raider.
Who are you planning on voting for?
I mean, I hope Bernie makes it through. I hope.
So you're not going to vote for?
the
Would you
primary and-
register as a Democrat so you can vote for him in the primary and help make that happen?
Yeah, I've done it in the past down here in Virginia. You can.
I'm just not
Okay,
clear
yeah.
on why you identify, like, who, I mean, who did you vote for? You know, what, you know, I just don't understand, like, what.
Hillary.
You voted for Hillary?
I voted for Hillary. I voted for Hillary because she was simply the most qualified candidate, and any
What
kind of
makes you-
personal problems that I
What
had
makes you
with her were
conservative? What makes you?
secondary to.
I understand. Believe me, I understand that. What makes you identify? I'm still not clear. What makes you identify as conservative? Like, where would you disagree with me on policy?
Well, for the same, well, I would ask if you identify as a Democrat, do you think, Obama's policy of unmitigated drone warfare in the Middle East, is that a defining characteristic of being a Democrat?
Well, Democrat is not an ideology. I mean, Democrat is simply a political party. Right. There's two major political parties. I register as a Democrat because I want to have a say in the primary, and more than likely, in most situations, the candidate that I am would support in the general is going to come from the Democratic Party. So I want to influence that, but I have no particular allegiance, to the Democratic Party. It's just simply a vehicle. I mean, I would call myself a leftist, but
part of it is cold calculation, because I feel like there's going to be a space for people like me in that political persuasion.
But Nathan,
in the next
you're still not
10, 15, 20 years.
You're still not defining for me what that is. Like, what
being a conservative? Or
yeah.
Being a conservative, or you want to protect the environment, and you want to ensure individual liberty, and you want to protect people from the worst kind of like the Hobbesian. You got to protect people from people, because the natural state of humanity is nasty, brutish, and short, and that's what government's there to prevent. That's what I view it as.
So you're a classical conservative. Is that it?
Sounds like a classical liberal to me.
Accept your definition.
Yeah, I'm just not clear on how that plays out. Because it seems to me there's nothing that.
Maybe I'm not. Maybe my terminology isn't developed.
Yeah, can I give you a reading recommendation? Read George Orwell's essay on Rudyard Kipling. Talks about Rudyard Kipling is sort of a conservative who also was probably a little bit too easy on that era's imperialism, as Teddy Roosevelt was. But talks about how conservatism basically became fascism, and there's not really conservatives left. So you might check that out.
Appreciate the call.
Kipling. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
I wish you well on your political journey.
You're not a conservative, you bastard.
Held me on the line the whole time.
I was gonna leave early, but I needed to define what it was. You Rudyard Kipling. You haven't said one thing that's conservative. God damn it, and my throat hurts.
It's true. All of that is absolutely true. Well, I'm going to no more calls. I got hoodwinked.
Can we call Bob? Yeah. Do we have his
why
number?
couldn't Bob have gotten some more time?
Feel free to call Bob.
The next time I'm really high on something, I'm going to call him and give him a taste of his own medicine. It's going to be hilarious for everyone.
No, I'll do it. Yeah, let's do this. We'll do a Milo update. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we do this. As you know, Milo Yiannopoulos is selling off his assets to recover from his massive debt. Is part of his right-wing grift. And up on eBay right now, Milo's throne chair used. Now, wait a second. Pause it. Oh, this ended April 16th. Didn't we look at this before? Oh, okay. So this ended April 16th, which was 2 weeks ago, and it was up for $1,400. There was, unfortunately, 0 bids.
No bids on that.
And so the way this works in eBay is that when you have no bids, then nobody buys it from you. And so this is the strategy that I learned from Matthew Film Guy. If you put it up at $1,400 and they get no bids, what you need to do is back off a little bit and go back a couple of weeks later at half price. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Milo's throne chair now just for $800. $800 available, and we are now only we have 6 days left, ladies and gentlemen. And to get in on this bidding, all you have to do is actually place a bid, because there are no bids. There are no bids at $800.
I also have to warn you, it's about $275 for shipping.
Yeah.
Because it's a 5-foot chair, 5-foot velvet throne. Milo was also offering on Instagram that he'll fly to your city and eat dinner with you, as long as you pay for the air travel, the lodging, and the dinner. So that's a good offer for people.
Is he okay? Like,
no, he's not.
Does he need to apply for some assistance of some sort?
He needs to talk to Matthew Lesko, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But there it is. We will give an update because we have 6 days and 23 hours to go on this bidding on Milo's throne chair. We'll check in over the course of the next couple of days to see how it's going. It's quite possible this bad boy may go for $825 or something like that. Or it may not go for anything.
Yeah, don't buy it if you're a listener of ours, because it's funnier if nobody bids on it than if one of our fans buys it. I mean, it's kind of funny.
Even if you're
I
one of
would
those
give him
people,
like $10 for it, maybe.
Yeah, but here's the problem: is that you're going to get people who are going to be like, "I'm going to bid $1,500 and never pay." No, don't do that.
Yeah,
don't do that. Just watch it go from 800, have them take it off after 6 days, come back 225. I mean, really. Wait until this is on Craigslist, where it's like, I will pay you $100 to come take this and get
free
rid
shipping.
of it. Exactly. No, you just come and pick it up, and I'll give you $100. That's what I'm aiming for.
It's a tough time. Having a tough.
All right.
Tough.
Sorry, callers.
Tough.
We don't have time for any more calls. Let's go to the IMs here. Depressive regressive. Thank you for your coverage of the common misconceptions of Medicare for All. I really like my prostate exam from my own doctor. Now co-pays won't get in the way of the magic. Dan from the La Hempa. Hey, Sam, question for Michael, actually. I'm visiting Old San Juan, Puerto Rico in another week, just hoping you could recommend a few museums, restaurants, bars, etc.
I was in Vieques, so I only spent a day in Old San Juan, so sorry, I cannot recommend.
Grandpa Sanchez, lavender sickness, cough, cough. It's terrible. Brock from VA finally saw the alt-right documentary on Netflix, thought it was going to be watered down, but was surprised how good it was. Even had good audio clip from Chapo Trap House. It's a perfect movie to show friends and family that don't follow this stuff. Colin from Nebraska. Sam, do your kids ever moan and groan when you walk into the house with a new sponsor's product for them to try? Yes. Rackham. Sam, you got to start checking the crosstabs on these polls. I've noticed at least 4 or 5 since Biden announced where they have been almost zero or literally zero voters under 50 included. I'm starting to wonder if his team is pushing polls done this way. I hope you listen to John from San Antonio. Dawson from Minneapolis. Please, Sam, let's be honest. Asking Bernie whether people will be able to keep their doctors pretty much like saying, well, what if someone's doctor retire or moves? Yes.
Nope. Sorry. 2 more years in the service.
You ain't moving.
You're
you
not
ain't
allowed.
moving. It's
You're
single
not allowed.
payer. Doctors don't get to move anymore.
Get in that
Don't
room.
get to move.
Get in that. Oh, all of a sudden, Rand's nightmares are coming true. You little prick.
Grudget Tugger Carlson. Majority Health Advisory. Reduce cross-infection rates by rinsing your microphone pop shields in a mild antiseptic. Listerine mouthwash occasionally. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Nick from Manitoba. Hey, Sam, how you doing? You still getting it? What?
Getting what?
I don't know. Winnipeg, Craig. Very upset Sam stopped John from San Antonio from wilding out about statistics and survey construction. My man knows what's up. Also, when is the Winnipeg General Strike centenary content? When is the General Strike? Next week, I think. We're doing it on the day of the strike. I can't remember when it is, but we're doing it on the day of the strike. You thought we were joking. We're not. Congressional baseball fan. As a professional baseball fan and comedy writer, I'm on the road a lot, which means I'm not always home on those special occasions with the family. Thankfully, Shari's Berries has me covered with rich milk, chocolate, dipped strawberries, and they accept PayPal. All right. Gleason. Sorry, Michael. I'm going to have to cut back on your podcast to make room for the new Bill and Chelsea Clinton podcast.
Me too.
JJ Cool.
Chelsea, is there another initiative that you wanted to cover?
Patreon.com. Bill and Chelsea.
They totally would do that. They totally would do
We're not going to give it away for free.
We're not giving it away for free. Now,
Patreon.com/Clinton Cash.
Clinton Cash, Patreon.com. Now, that's all behind the paywall if you want to hear Chelsea and I.
Here's a 2-minute teaser.
Today's show.
2-minute teaser.
Today's show is sponsored by Goldman Sachs. If you have a portfolio worth $500,000 or more, Goldman will take care of your Roth IRA. JJ Cool. Trump appears to be setting up a story for himself. Should he lose the election, do you think he tries to dispute the results through the courts or the Democrats will fight back unequivocally? I don't think he's going to try and dispute the results. I just don't think there is a disputing of the results except for rhetorically. Because if he loses, the protection will be from a big fan base. And it will be, he will start a media enterprise. I mean, that's the thing is he's not going to go away. This is not over. Joe Biden wants to think that he will come in and everything will turn to fairy dust. And that's just naive. And, that's also, I feel like I could go and write every single candidate's lines. Everyone will take a different one, in criticizing his perspective on things.
Today's show is brought to you by Third Love. I've got a friend that tells me they're real nice bras. They're real nice bras.
All right.
Problem is that style and function all too often have not been synthesized into a third way of bra functionality.
That's right. The new triangle-shaped cups.
Third way bras. Write that one down.
Completely triangulated bra cups. The three segments maintain.
For too long, there's been a false choice between a bra that says, I'm me, I'm an individual with style and taste, but also I want to be comfortable and move with ease and fluidity. Third Way rejects these false choices and brings you a bra that equips you for the 21st century information economy.
Kentucky Fried Comrade. Hey, Sam, during the call regarding Medicare for All's effect on administrative jobs, I think it's important to point out that under the current system, some percentage of those jobs essentially make work jobs, adding unnecessary costs. Yes, some of those jobs will need to go for efficiency, but that's why it's important for the job training transitions. Yes, I think I made that point. I think, there's a whole host of situations where you're going to lose jobs and gain jobs in any major policy. But in many respects, that's the point. And you got to make sure that there's a program to retrain folks. But that it's a make job for somebody, who's supporting a family is not necessarily a comfort. Telling them that. And it's not necessarily something that's going to, be helpful to the economy in the short run. You need to be able to place these people back in other jobs and, make them productive to the extent that they're up for doing that. It's the same dynamic, I think, with like coal miners,
Yeah, people don't love mining coal, just like people don't love working for insurance companies. They like having stable jobs and having all the things that they need because of that. So going from that principle, I think it makes a whole lot of sense what Bernie's policy proposals are.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think that's probably true in the main, but I think that it's from a rhetorical standpoint, saying that people don't like their jobs, they'll be happy to get a different job is not necessarily, I think.
I do think that's interesting, although, Lee Carter actually said that when he was running for state senate that he did test out some message of like, you work too much for not enough. And there needs to be a backing for people to basically not have to work all the time. It's not the same as losing, but I do think, and then, Jeremy Rifkin,
I think, look, you work too hard is a fundamentally different message that, frankly, even Bill Clinton used on some. It's like you follow the rules, you do what you're supposed to do, you work hard, but you still you don't get what you deserve.
Chelsea never feels basic with these.
And people don't want to have to work like 3 jobs at once. That's another thing that they like about their jobs.
But people working in the insurance industry aren't necessarily doing that.
But also read.
No, I know.
Let's do
Can I just say, read really quick? Jeremy Rifkin wrote a book in the 90s called The End of Work, and he predicted automation. And actually, people like Paul Krugman said he was an idiot. Now all the stuff he's saying, it seems to be pretty broadly sort of accepted. But he was proposing updating New Deal things in the sense that his definition of getting people back to work was so broadly expanded that it could be like, you could pay people to be like community mentors. You could pay people to be artists. You could pay people to build. Like it could
I'll
be
tell you what I would do.
radically expanded definition of supporting people materially to do useful things.
I tell you what I would do with people who are working at the point of delivery for medicine, who have been sitting in those offices, trying to do billing, is I would make these people in hospitals basically doulas for patients.
Right.
Like
that's an amazing idea.
There is such a desperate need, it seems to me, that when you get into into hospitals in particular, that the processes are such that the procedures are so often just a function about running a business and not medically necessary, that patients don't know what they should be doing at different times, don't know how to exert their rights, and also don't know how to protect themselves. Look, being in a hospital is one of the most dangerous places you can be in terms of getting sick. And part of that is because these are businesses that are run like businesses, and they will suffer some inefficiencies because it is cost prohibitive in their mind to seal those, to deal with those inefficiencies that cause, people to die, to get infections and whatnot. I mean, having gone through this with a loved one and seeing the trade-off between teams of doctors, you have this presumption of like, oh, Dr. Jones and Dr. Smith, they have they've coordinated, they know what's going on. There's the handoff between the kidney doctor and the pulmonary doctor, and they confer. And no, they don't. they don't. And it would be great to have like patient advocates who are there, who know enough about the procedure of the hospital, know enough about, you don't even need to know that much about medicine. You just need to know about the procedures of the hospitals, some basic stuff about medicine to sort of say like, this is medically necessary. This is a question of procedure. This is what you got to tell the doctor to make sure that this is information the doctor needs to have in their forefront of their, as they come to your patient. I mean, it's not that hard. It's just there's the same dynamic of like, I don't know if anybody's ever waited tables, but I remember you go into a new restaurant, you're just like, I'm never going to be able to do this. Or the first time you wait tables, you're like, this is impossible. And then by day 3, you're like, I'm bored. Right. Chug Toad. That Grande fool is going to get us innocent Latino folks hurt out here with his extortion. I live out here. They're no joke. Come here. Shake my head. Those Eastern Washington sheriffs are no joke. They're fascist. American There's also that thought that in time of war you shouldn't change the commander-in-chief. Yeah. Iron Keiju, thank you for all your work in informing us. So would you please sound the horn for my father who has recently passed? He was an undocumented immigrant who worked tirelessly for very little but still found a way to take care of his family. He paid taxes and Social Security and loved this country very much, but he could not receive the health care that he needed. Thank you and peace to everyone. I'm very sorry for your loss.
Britain changed prime ministers before World War II was wrapped up and then got the NHS out of it. So
we changed presidents in the middle of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Yes. The final I am of the day from Henry Wadsworth Thickfellow. Not sure if my I am handle is better than Don de la Grande. Now I want to change my I am handle to Don del Grande. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want. but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get